All right. Look, this article, I feel like this is a ongoing situation. I'd love to get your take on this, Danielle. But essentially, there's a study that's shown that nearly half of U.S. middle managers. So these are kind of like the drones. Just kidding. I love middle management. These middle managers are more stressed out than ever before. And what this results in is the people that actually report into them. Over 30% of people are reporting that they can actually feel the stress from that manager. And the areas that we're seeing a lot of this in is areas like oil and gas, hospitality, healthcare, like these really like high stress environments. Interestingly enough, we're going to have a guest later on where we're going to be talking about the hospitality industry. So I'm really looking forward to getting her take on this. But middle management's feeling stressed out. Like, does this surprise you, Danielle? What do you think the root cause of this is?
I don't think it's surprising. I actually read a report last year. I can't remember where it was, but it was all about middle managers. And, management has been a topic of conversation, a hot one the past year. Mainly, that study was looking at what are the different stressors and how do they spend their time. And the one takeaway that I thought stood out was that a lot of middle managers are spending time doing admin stuff, pushing papers, things that they really don't want to do and likely could be automated by AI now. And, we weren't adopting AI as rapidly as we are now, a year ago. But I think that a lot of managers really would like to spend more time learning and developing not only themselves but other people and serving as sort of serving as like more of a human role internally at companies. So I would like to see them do more of that. I think when you are able to pour into someone else, it lowers your stress because you feel like you're giving, right? And it all comes back to you. So that's kind of my take on managers.
Yeah, and look, this article, it says one of the kind of the side effects of this is, and we'll talk about this later on as well, is you actually end up leaving um, leaving people feeling like they're not going to be supported. So a lot of people are reporting that um, because their
Right.
manager's stressed out, they're not able to then to actually support them and kind of guide
Right.
them.
I mean,
Um,
it's similar to like if a parent is stressed out, you're worried like you're going to get less attention, right? And I think that's such a human tendency and a human thought and belief and feeling. So I feel like in an organization where, ultimately all of us want to be learning and growing internally, I think that having a manager who's stressed out, you'd naturally feel that way.
Yeah, 100%. And look, to reiterate this too, the industries where people are feeling the most stressed out are oil, gas, and mining, retail, construction, manufacturing, transportation, logistics, supply chain, and storage. And what I think is interesting is a lot of these industries, and I've worked in a lot of these industries in recruitment, and helping them recruit talent. One of the things that I see consistently is, a lot of these industries are kind of more old school. They're less likely to have embraced things like flexibility and like seeing that as
New tools. Yeah.
yeah. I remember talking to someone about who was in manufacturing, and they're having a real tough time hiring people for that frontline production work. And I had suggested, well, why not offer some sort of schedule where you can as you stay with the company, you could maybe pick your schedule, you could kind of morph things around a little bit. And they were like, yeah, that's impossible. And I was like,
Mm.
well, that's why these industries, if you're gonna do things the same way you did them 20, 30 years ago, you then struggle to attract people into the industry. But then if people get into the industry and then they feel like you're stressed because you're understaffed, it's a kind of a brutal circle all across the way. What do
Right.
you advice for? And you're probably going to get into this a little bit more, and obviously your talk is on this. But like, what's some advice that you have for managers when it comes to potentially attracting Gen Z, and then like how would you um, how would you kind of advise them to manage and kind of avert some of that stress that they have? Like, how would you kind of what are some of the things that Gen Z is looking for, and might what are some of those telltale signs that they might
Yeah.
look at and go, "Hey, you're stressed out," or, maybe that they're not aware of?
Such a good question. One of the things that I talk about in this keynote that I'm doing, it's basically all around the three C's of managing Gen Z. And the first one is connection. And the second one is co-creation, and the third is clarity.
Mm,
And the first one is really about how do I connect with my Gen Zers. And I think the first and foremost like best way is to be transparent. And so when you're stressed and you're dealing with a lot of, factors, and you're managing between different levels in an organization, like bringing your young professionals and your counterparts into the conversation to explain to them all the different factors of what you're dealing with and who you're dealing with, and kind of like bringing them into the process is one of the best ways to keep them engaged and realistically keep them happy. Because if they're asking you for something and it's adding on to your pile of stress, to say no, I can't do that is not going to kind of be a sufficient answer. It's like, well, why? And like, I think the more that you bring us into the conversation and you kind of be vulnerable in a certain way, the better off you'll be.
yeah. Yeah, and I also think giving people a chance, and I can see this being, a challenge for a lot of managers, especially if you are new to management, you don't necessarily feel, like, comfortable in delegating tasks, but being able to set clear boundaries, setting clear expectations, delegating tasks, and, if you've got somebody that maybe doesn't have the experience in your team, that's okay. Start giving them, um, jobs and working with them to actually help them grow versus just trying to
Right.
take all the tasks on yourself. I've had managers like that before that just feel like they have to take everything on, and, they're not willing to almost let go of some of that work as well, so being able to delegate that. What about communication? Gen Z want more communication or less communication?
Definitely more, but I would say it depends on the channels, right? So like we don't want to be bombarded with emails, or like phone calls. A lot of Gen Zers are afraid of phone calls, which I find really funny. But I think that communication, in my opinion, is best done. I mean, it obviously depends, but like one on one. I think that there's a certain level of respect. Obviously, it depends, where I'm major generalizing right now. But I think it's a sign of respect when you're able to, as a manager, say, I need time to sit down with this person and like give them my full attention and be not just be there, but like be present and be actively listening. I think that is something that goes a long way with this generation.
Yeah, 100%. What are your thoughts on we have so many generations in the workplace right now, and it doesn't really feel like people talk a lot about, like, how communication should be done. So, like, what are your thoughts on, like, just figuring out how your team best communicates and, like, how they wanna be managed? Would that be useful? Like, that it's obviously everybody, no matter what generation they're in, they're gonna have different preferences with this. But I find a lot of time people, they don't take the time to even figure out, like, okay, what's the best way to communicate? Like,
Right.
do you prefer a Slack? Do you prefer a phone call? 'Cause I know some people who love phone calls and love to just talk things out versus going through email. Thoughts on, like, how you could facilitate those conversations?
It's so funny because next week I'm doing another Gen Blend episode with my friend Sophie Wade, where we like
Shout out,
dissect. Yeah, shout out Sophie. We dissect these like intergenerational questions that are really critical to the way we work. And next week is all about, is your team communicating effectively? So we did not set this up, but you just posed that question,
I
which is
plugged it.
crazy.
That's what I always
Um,
do.
but one of the things we're talking about in like the solutions part, which is at the end of the talk, is going to be about like team agreements, and coming up with not just like playing it by ear. I think that adds to the stress of management when they don't know what channels to communicate on. If like, someone's not responding to the Slack message, but you need everyone to respond in order to move forward with like setting a meeting time or something like that, not everyone's responding to an email. I think it's great to sort of establish your working agreement, establish as a team how are we going to communicate, what's the channel that really, is like a emergencies only, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's something that we're gonna dive a little bit into next week. So tune in Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time on
You heard it.
LinkedIn.
You heard it first here on Purple Acorn and the HR Morning Show, which I
Yeah,
love.
you
And a
did.
special shout out to the Pause who is in the house. We miss you a little bit, but hopefully Pause is feeling
Only a little.
100% this week. It's great to see you.